My name is Daniel Longoria. I'm from Lindsay, California. Between the ages of 12 and 30, I was incarcerated on drugs, and back when I was young, we used to call it La Vida Loca, which is, my crazy life. And it just seemed like whenever something got hard, it was like, who cares, my crazy life, who cares, La Vida Loca, and we would just do it. It was kind of gave us permission. Now I think the younger people use a whole different language to describe it. But between the ages of 12 and 30, I spent 2 years out free in accumulated time. I spent all my teens and 20s. I never went to a junior high dance, high school dance, graduation. I got my high school diploma in Preston in the youth authority. I don't know the difference between a winter formal and a wedding. I really don't know. I just know sometimes I look at teenagers all dressed up, and I know what a winter formal is now by asking, but I still don't know what the experience is. A lot of times over the years since I've been out, people ask me, don't you ever regret all those years you spent incarcerated? And it's not the years incarcerated that I regret because I did things and I had to be held accountable. I regret the fact that I didn't feel a lot of the things that other teenagers got to feel. I don't know what it feels like to turn 13. I turned 13 in boys camp. 16, I turned in the youth authority when people are doing their driver's ed. 18, becoming a man, I turned 18 in the youth authority in Preston. Turned 21 in prison. Missed out on a lot of those things. I felt the same way when I was 10 years old as I did when I was 30 years old. I just learned how to numb myself, and not feeling felt good. And I'll tell you a little bit about that. When I was, between the ages of 5 and 8, I was a good kid. I'll show you guys some pictures, or you guys can see them, of my school pictures when I was in first grade, second grade, third grade. And I was a good kid. I listened to my teachers. I loved school. I used to go to Bible study, Cub Scouts, take care of my brothers and sisters, and I loved it. I'm kind of in the middle. There's 8 of us in my family. And when I was in third grade, I used to get called names in school. I used to get called MRFF. In translation means mental retarded freckle face, because living in Lindsay, you were either Mexican or you were white. There was only really 2 major races there in the community, and this is in the 70s, and I was a Mexican, but I had light brown hair with freckles. So it was like the white kids would, they knew I was Mexican and they didn't like me, so they'd call me names. And the Mexican kids knew I was Mexican, but I looked more white, so they used to tease me, so I was MRFF. And those were some hard days. I'd always get picked last. And if you've heard this before, then good. Because, there are certain patterns, and if you're a teacher or you're an educator, there are patterns you should look for. And one of the best times to assess if somebody's being bullied is when they're out there getting picked for outside sports. Look at the way they're being picked. And that's a good sign to be able to know, because the kids who are getting picked on are always the last 3. So it's a really good assessment tool, something that I use. I don't know if you guys want to use it. But based on my experience, that's what would happen. Then in third grade, to this day, I don't know who did it. I was walking with my tray, and I was in third grade, so kindergarten, first, second grade were already in the cafeteria, and I think our class was last. So just imagine an elementary school cafeteria full of kids, and we used to go through this line, get our food, and then come out. And when we'd come out, there were the milks. And so I came out, got the milk, and as I was walking, I really don't even remember the full details. If they tripped me from the table because I went by the first table, or if somebody behind me caught my leg or what. All I remember is that somebody tripped me and I fell in the cafeteria, landed on all my food. I got up and I felt afraid, I felt embarrassed, I felt scared. And, you know, I got up, I was crying, had food all over me. You can imagine over 100 kids laughing their heads off. It was traumatic. And I was crying, and I had boogers coming out, and I was, oh, and people kept laughing and laughing. And understand that with a third grade mind, I imagined the teachers were laughing too. And the reason I mention that is because I used to love my teachers, and, you know, when I would get positive accolades from a teacher, it would make my day. Danny, your writing's getting better. Danny, you're really getting good at math. Danny, you can really read. Charlotte's Web was my first and most favorite book of all time. And I liked that. And so I used to trust them. And when that day happened, I remember I felt something inside of me. Now, that all had to do with kids messing with me. Like I said, the MRFF, the tripping in the cafeteria. And then I remember looking around and everybody's laughing. And something happened to me that day that kind of defined me from that point at 8 years old to the age of 29 and a half, I would say, the last time I was in Pelican Bay. And what happened was the experience was so overwhelming emotionally that I changed the way I felt. And I took all those feelings of shame, discomfort, fear, embarrassment, and I changed the way I felt and turned it into anger. A lot of times when you see kids and they have a bad temper or they have anger issues, I'll tell you, I didn't have anger issues. I never had a bad temper, but that situation just, I don't know if it's something instinctively that you do as a human being, but without any provocation or without any video game or anything, I can tell you honestly what happened was that experience was so much that the way I handled it is I turned all those emotions into anger. And I was angry at my teachers, I was angry at those kids, and they took me to the office to change my clothes. And I don't know how it is now, but back then when you would get muddy or rip your shirt, they'd take you to the school office and they always had spare clothes. And it was like the worst clothes. I don't know if you guys ever remember that. And it was always something crazy, you know, and you know, some t-shirt with the cat in the hat, I don't know, some crazy stuff that kids would tease you more for. And I went out to recess, it was after lunch, I didn't eat, went out there, you know, got cleaned up, and they gave me a shirt, and it was like worse. It was like a green neon or an orange, I can't remember what it was like. They put me out there and kids were running around, hey, there's MRFF, and it was just horrible. And I'm standing out there and I was just mad. And I can't remember being mad because I always liked being kind and nice. And what happened, there were some kids messing with me, so I would like chase them, like, leave me alone. And two boys, twin brothers that were the bullies of the school who used to lead the MRFF march came up to me and they befriended me that day. They were like, hey, leave them alone. And they ran off the kids. And that day, those boys became more important than school, teachers, being good. And every day I look forward to going to school and seeing them. And that's how it happened for me. And from there, I started tripping kids, and I would knock stuff out, and I'd chase girls, and it just kind of went that way. And by the time I was 10 years old, I believe a lot of the situations that made these two boys bullies had a lot to do with their home life, because my mom was a farm labor worker and my father, and they were contractors eventually. And then I had 8 brothers and sisters. And what ended up happening was my parents got divorced the year after that. So remember, I'm going through these traumatic experiences, the MRFF, the cafeteria incident. The very next school year, my parents get divorced. And these guys are my friends through all this. Well, these guys' family, they're pretty much heroin dealers, marijuana dealers. They're the ones that are putting tattoos on people. So without even knowing, unbeknownst to me, I'm friends with these guys. And next thing you know, at 10 years old, I had my first tattoo, which was here. And by the time I was in 6th grade, I had a tattoo here, a tattoo here, a tattoo here, and tattoos here. And I was 12. You know, I was in 6th grade. And, you know, my mom used to work in the field. She became a foreman. They gave up the contracting. And When I was 10 years old, I have 2 younger brothers that are immediate after me. I actually have 3 younger brothers and 1 younger sister. But the one that's right after me is 3 years younger. So I was 10, he was 7. The one after him is 5 years younger, so he was 5. And the 7-year-old used to have a friend, and his grandma babysitted him down the street, like 5 houses down. And the uncle used to take care of him. Grandma was usually gone doing something. And we'd go over there, and the uncle would pretty much just leave. So we had the house to ourselves. Well, what ended up happening was the uncle had Playboy magazines, cigarettes, alcohol. So at 10 years old, we would look at Playboy books, and I'd make my little brothers look at them. And what is that? And so then we'd smoke cigarettes, and I'd make them smoke cigarettes. And I'd drink Olympia beer. I don't know if they even make that anymore. But it was beer, and I'd make them drink it. And the way it's interpreted today, and the way now that I look back, I was bullying them. I was bullying my younger brothers. And I'm not proud of it. But today I work as a drug and alcohol counselor, a gang interventionist. So at my job, I work with kids. I do 4 groups a week, and every group has 10 kids in it, and I talk about a lot of these things. And the last time I talked to them about bullying my little brothers, it was like every one of them knew what I was talking about. Either they bullied their little brothers, or they were the older brothers bullying the little people, or I mean, their older brothers bullied them. And it was just amazing. It's like, wow, I never really seen it that way, but I believe that bullying doesn't just happen at schools. I believe it happens at home. And the reason that I used to do that, because at 10 years old, if my younger brothers are going to tell on me, well, I'm going to make them smoke cigarettes so they can't tell on me. I'm going to make them drink beer so they can't tell on me. And that's kind of what happens. So a lot of times when people say, well, they're all messed up. You know, the whole family is, all 3 brothers are messed up. I can see why. Luckily, and I know that's a morbid way of putting it, I know it's twisted, but luckily I got incarcerated soon after at the age of 12, because my younger brother at that time was 10, wanted to start dressing like I used to, and he was following in my footsteps. And at 12 I got incarcerated, and like I said, I spent the next 18 years incarcerated. Luckily, my mom was able, I was out of the picture, and my mom was able to rein them in, both of my younger brothers, and they wound up having a good high school education. They got through, you know, junior high and high school, played sports. They played sports, went to junior college, got married. Both of my brothers are correctional officers today. And they told me something not too long ago. I think I've been out 15 years. June was 15 years that I've been out since I got out. And they told me something like 5 years ago. What my brothers told me was, you know, Daniel, we were at a family thing, I think it was Easter, and they said, we really hated you. And I was like, you know, I didn't get it. And they were able to have the courage, and we had the time, and we were sitting there, and they explained to me that they hated me, and the reason they hated me was because they said when I was incarcerated, I used to make my mom cry. She goes, she used to wait for your phone call, and then after she'd finished talking to you, she would cry at night. And no matter what we said or did, we couldn't comfort her. There is no way anything we do here in person could fix what you were doing by not being here. And wow, you know, I'm getting these chills up my back. You know, I feel this emotion brewing in me. And I remember looking at them, and I had no response. And that's when I realized, you know what? I was being mean to my mom too. I bullied my whole family. And you know, I remember growing up, and counselors would tell me, because there was always a counselor, a coach, a pastor, a scout leader. There was always somebody trying to tell me, you know, when you get in trouble, you just think of yourself, but you hurt a lot of people. And I was like, no, I don't. I'm the one that's getting locked up. How does that hurt anybody? And it wasn't until I was out 10 years that my little brothers, who I used to bully, had the courage to stand up to me and tell me, hey, not only were you mean to us, but you bullied mom, you bullied all of us, you bullied the whole family from far away, and you do hurt people. You do hurt people when you're going through that life. I got out. Well, of course, you can't be that type of kid and go into juvenile hall and become a good kid. So at 12 years old, it just compounded the problem. And at 12 years old, I was with nothing but bullies. I was with nothing but kids who knew how to change their emotion into anger. And one of the things that I find funny now is, like, I remember if something made me feel kind of shy, or something made me embarrassed, or something scared me, rather than show that, I would just like, and now they call it all kinds of different things, they call it eyeballing, they call it, nonverbal disrespect. There's a lot of terminology, but you see these kids do it right away. Now I know, based on my life, and when I see these kids do it, that when they're walking and they're doing this to you, they're feeling something. And I understand. You can be at a stoplight in your vehicle and you look over and there's a kid there and he looks at you and he's just looking at you all hard. Well, he's probably embarrassed because he's walking. I'm walking, here you are in a car and it's hot, and and so that's what I do now. Now when I see younger people and they give me these looks, I tell myself, what feeling are they trying to hide? What feeling or what emotion are they changing? What feeling are they turning into anger to cope with it? Because that's what I did. And I became really good at coping. And hopefully you can see, some of the pictures, but I have pictures of when I got out and the look I had on my face. And the look I had on my face was dead, just totally stoic, flat affect, because you learn to change the way you feel. And a lot of people can't do that. A lot of people don't have the ability, like say a gang kid, to just change the way he feels, because in juvenile hall they're clean and sober and they can keep that flat affect stoic thing. A lot of kids and other people can't, so drugs and alcohol help them. There is truth to if you're feeling insecure, weird about anything, you drink some beers and you're the most confident guy in the world. Same thing with marijuana, things like that. And I believe it's true. And some people just need some outside help. But what it comes down to is not feeling good. And when you do that for a long time, it's hard to start feeling. It really is. When I got clean and sober, my clean and sober date is January 21st, 1997. And today is October the 20th, 2011. January 21st coming up, I'll have 15 years clean and sober. And one of the things that my sponsor told me my first year clean is, because I used to always say, well, what's the use of getting clean and sober? Aside from not getting busted and stuff, really. I think once I get out, and I was out a year, I had 2 years left of parole. Once I get off parole, I think I can have a few beers. I think I can do a few things. And he used to tell me, no, Daniel, no. And one of the things he said to me was, when you are truly clean and sober, not only physically, where your body's teetotal, no intoxicants or anything, but when you're clean and sober, also in the way you think, you're not always plotting and trying to change the way you feel, he said, you're going to feel better. Well, I thought I was going to feel better, like, when you find $100, whoa, all this serotonin, yeah, I feel great. No, what he meant was you're going to feel pain better, you're going to feel hurt better, you're going to feel sadness better, because wow, I'll tell you, my first 3 years clean and sober, I went through some personal things in my life, and boy, did I feel those. And you know what? I didn't run from them. Anymore. One of the things that happened to me, like I said, from being bullied over my life, was I discovered how to change the way I felt and felt anger. Another thing that I did was I did it without knowing I was doing it. If somebody would have just explained it to me, if someone would have just said, hey, look, have you ever, if the first time I went to juvenile hall, if somebody would have said, what I'm saying to you right now, do you have little brothers? Have you ever made them smoke weed or drink so they don't tell on you? That's bullying. If someone would have made that clear to me, perhaps I would have been able to be like, no. Because in a gang and in that setting, it's like families respect. You can't disrespect each other. Certainly there's this, this huge thing about respect. And to be a counselor that would have been in there and put us all in a group and said, you're all disrespecting your family, maybe it would have made a difference. But, I don't know. But maybe it would have. But no one made that clear. So it's like, I want to make sure people understand. I want to arm as many people that work with children with the right tools on how to look for bullying, how to address it. What are some things that you can say and hopefully be able to help them? Nobody could really help me with that, People would just talk to me and they would say, what you're doing is wrong, you're a bad kid, look at you, you're in 6th grade and have 3 tattoos already. But eventually people started helping me in my late 20s when I got out of prison, and the last time I got out of prison. My parole agent, Gary P., he was really good. He was really good at calling me on my stuff. I remember when I had been using, because there's a discrepancy. I got out in June, but I got clean in January. There's a 6-month discrepancy there where I thought I had it all figured out, but I didn't. And so I was testing dirty, and I went over there and I told him, okay, I'm ready to go back. And he was like, what are you talking about? And I said, I'm ready to go back, because I know all you have to do is 12 months, When you come out of Pelican Bay, where I was validated. You do 12 months from the day they incarcerate you till you get out. And I know that sounds crazy because it's like 12 months, Daniel, incarcerated, and it was like nothing. And it was like, yeah, it wasn't. It was nothing anymore. And he told me no. He goes, no. You know what? As a matter of fact, get out of my office. You're not even worth the paperwork. You're not even, just get out. And I was like, no, you have to lock me up. I've tested dirty and you have to lock me up. Because see, what I was more addicted to was starting over. Because I'd come out, I'd blow it, I'd go to jail, everybody would forget about all the stuff I'd done, and then I'd get out and get a chance to start over, clean slate. So I was ready to do that, and he was like, no. He goes, what you need to do is you need to go talk to your boss. I was working at a cabinet shop, and tell him you've been using, and if he'll save your job for you or whatever till you get help. He goes, because if your problem is drugs and alcohol, Daniel, you need to get help for that. And somewhere along the way, the drugs and alcohol, the gang mentality, the bullying, it all just went together. I was a bigger bully, I thought, as a kid, but actually I was a bully when I was in my first relationship with my daughter's mom. I used to bully her too. So what Gary told me was, no, you need to go face your kids, your family, your employer, and tell them what you've been doing. And to me, I was like, no, I'd rather go to jail for a year than do that. And he looked at me and he told me, when you got out of Pelican Bay, I was like, wow, what an articulate guy. He has a great vocabulary. He's got all this potential. He's going to do something with him. He goes, I was actually impressed by a convict. He goes, but here you are out, not even 6 months, and you're just a junkie. That's all you are. You're just a junkie. And he used the word bully. You're a bully. You're a junkie. You're nothing. You're just like everybody else in prison. You talk a good one, and you're really good at convincing people about what you're going to do, but you always do the same thing, and you just give up. He goes, get out of here. And that's when it hit me. I was like, wow, I can't even get myself locked up anymore. That's pretty bad, let me tell you. That's pretty bad. For someone who's been doing time since he was 12 and your parole agent won't even lock you up anymore, it's like, so guess what's the first thing I did when I felt that? Yes, I made myself angry. Oh yeah? Well, F this. And so I started walking down the hall, hitting the wall. And the parole office in Visalia has like 10 offices. And so I was saying, you know, because usually there was parole agents everywhere. I figured one of them will get up and say, hey, settle down. And I'll cuss at them and get into a little, and they'll take me away. And I'll get what I want. That day I was walking down the whole hall, not one person. And I remember I got to the end of the door, and the feelings that I had been saving for so long, it's almost like the feelings I had been saving since that day in the cafeteria that I was showing, and then I can't show this emotion anymore. It just overcame me. And I remember I just started sobbing and crying, and I turned around, walked down the hall and sat in his office, and he just ignored me, was doing his thing on his computer, and I cried and cried. And you know, I don't know how long I was there, but it felt so good to finally just cry. And I told him, okay, Gary, what do I got to do? Help me. And he said, well, I think drug and alcohol for starters. And that's where it started, you know? That's where it started. And I think that was like in December, because it took a month to get into the rehab I went to. It was out here in Porterville, the S.H.A.R.E Center. It's a residential. And took me till January 21st to get in there. And of course, I left his office, we made the calls, and I went for an interview, and I kept using up to that point. As a matter of fact, I said I was going to quit on January 1st, and I didn't get clean till the 21st. But I'll tell you, I realized that all those years, I wasn't a very tough guy. You know, that's why I put all the tattoos on. I put all the tattoos on because today I believe the more you have on the outside, the less you have on the inside. And what I mean by inside and less is courage, integrity. In Spanish we call it palabra, a man's word, which is integrity, decency, self-respect. I didn't have none of that. And so what I would do is I would act tough and bully people and disrespect people and always act mad and intimidate. But on the inside, I hadn't worked on myself at all in 18 years. And so what I did is I really got to work on myself. And after that third year out, by the time I was at 2 years, I had a year and a half clean and sober. I had been out 2 years. I was like, I remember I was standing at a supermarket, and my daughters lived with their mom by then. I have 3 girls. They were 15, 13, and 7, if I'm not mistaken. But I had my girls, and it's not because I don't know my kids' birthdays, it's just because I'm kind of doing all this thinking. But so I had 2 of my girls, and I was at a supermarket, and I had a tank top on, and I had all these tattoos, and I just remember looking around, and I had all these gang tattoos, spider web here, numbers here, all this stuff, and I remember feeling uncomfortable. And you know what? It was the first time that I was doing things to feel proud of on the inside. Like I was working, and I was taking my children to buy them something. I wasn't like, Mom, can you lend me money? Because, you know, I don't know, man. Tough gangsters are notorious for living at Mom's and borrowing Mom's car and borrowing money from Mom. And I was doing all these things to feel good about myself, and suddenly I didn't feel good about the way I looked. And Gary P. helped me, and I started removing my tattoos through this program. And 7 years later, I removed all my tattoos except for this one, but you can see the pictures, all the before and afters, and I removed them. And now I look back in retrospect, and it's like everything that I used to do on the outside, from the clothes I wore and the tattoos and even the machismo, everything, you know, it's like I now wear it on the inside. I don't have to wear it on the outside anymore. And I work with kids now, adolescents. They're not kids, between the ages of 13 and 18 boys, and there's 46 of them from all over the state. And they're all gang kids, and a lot of them have been through 3, 5 placements. Sometimes it's their first, and they're just like ready. Some of them are ready, some of them need to hear a few things. But it's funny, even the ones that abscond, they run from the program or get kicked out, call later And they always give me feedback, and it's a spiritual paycheck, you know? But, I mean, there's like so much more to go on, but that's kind of, I just want to make sure that people understand that bullying isn't just a kid at school that's tripping people and taking kids' lunch. Bullies are older brothers. Bullies are husbands or boyfriends. And it took me a long time to figure that out too.
One thing, Daniel, can you talk about your bodybuilding a little bit and why you got into that and how it's going?
What happened is nobody has ever explained this, so I'm going to explain this to you. You're hearing it here now. People talk to you about you need to get out of gangs, you need to change your life, you need to da-da-da-da-da-da. But our motto at work is something that the director and I developed. And the motto is, if you want these kids to change, then you have to replace what they came here with something better. And when they get to our program, they come with negative pride, machismo, this ability to turn any uncomfortable feeling into anger and gangs. And we have to replace that with something better. So we have to change their belief of a head change, weed and partying with something better. Gangs is something better. All that. Street respect. And it's really hard. No one explained this to me. So when I was ready to change my life, and it was the last time I was in Pelican Bay, and when I was ready to change my life and I got out, no one explained to me that you can have a lot of stuff set up for you, but you get lonely. You do. Because you can't spend even a year, you know, in juvenile hall, in the youth center, in displacement, and that. You know, one thing I discovered is that as human beings, I like to call it, we're herd animals. We're not made to be by ourselves. So when a person says, I'm going to get out and leave everybody and I'm just going to do what I have to, that's like, I'm telling you right now, that's the first thing. Okay, your plan already has a defect in it, because that's what I did. I got out, I was by myself, didn't call nobody, see anybody, went to see my parole agent, went to this program, got a resume. They helped me get a job, and I'd go to work and come home, and before you know it, I was bored. I was lonely. And I went to, you know, AA meetings, NA meetings, and okay, that was good because it gave me the ability to speak with others who understood me. But still, there was a lot of alone time. So what ended up happening was I had to fill my day. So I had to go to work, I had to try to go to school, but there was still some stuff. So what I did is I sat and I started writing down. It's a self-inventory, they call it. What are some of the things that you're interested in? And so I sat down and I started writing things down. This is what my sponsor helped me with. And I remember always wanting to be muscular. You know, I remember looking at magazines when I was a kid in the 70s, and that's kind of when bodybuilding first went. Mr. Universe, Mr. America, and then Mr. Olympia started in the 80s, I think. And before you know it, that's what I wanted. And somehow I kept circling that one. So what I did is I would go to work, and from the cabinet shop, I worked in packing houses. Then I worked graveyard shifts, cleaning out machines that do vegetables. I had a variety of jobs when I first got out. And what I ended up doing is I got into bodybuilding as a hobby, something of interest, to help replace what I felt I had lost with something better. Work helped with self-esteem and self-support and independence. Then I would go to classes. I got my CAS to be a certified addiction specialist. And what you do, it was 6 months every Saturday for 8 hours. And you could only miss 3. So 6 months is a lot of Saturdays, 8 hours. Think of if you could give up 6 months of Saturdays. It's difficult, but they compact all this stuff on drug and alcohol to certify you as an addiction specialist. And so I was doing that on Saturdays. I was working during the day, and then in the evenings I would work out. And I didn't know what I was going to do with it. I just wanted to work out. And then as I started removing my tattoos, it felt like the right thing to do because, hey, I want to be proud of the way I look and how I feel. And I think I owe it to myself because I'm a recovering heroin addict and alcoholic. And that put a lot of damage on my body. Again, I'm glad that I only spent 2 years out in those 20 years because in those 2 years that I was out, I overdosed on alcohol and barbiturates. I overdosed on cocaine and I overdosed on heroin. I was in 5 car wrecks, drunk every time. So that kind of gives you an idea of those 2 years I was out, when I was out, how hard I partied. And so I got into bodybuilding as a way to forgive myself for all the damage I had done to myself. And one thing led to another, and this guy, this nutritionist at a gym here in Visalia said, you have pretty good somatics, and what that means is pretty much your body responds real good to what you're doing. If you change the way you ate, your nutrition, you could really do something with it. And I was in the process. I had some tattoos removed. So in my 30s, I started bodybuilding, and I did 3 shows. I got 6th twice and 3rd once. And then I kind of kept with it. And then I stopped for a while, and then I really got into doing what I'm doing now as my career. And I put it on the back burner. Then in my 40s, I started again. And at 45, I don't know if you can see it. I'll show you a picture. I just did a show just not too long ago. And, well, October, not too long ago. It's been a year. But this is my picture. I got 10th out of 54, and I did a national show. And I'm looking forward to doing that again. And I do that. I guess what I'm trying to say, I got into it as a way to make myself feel good about me. Because what ends up happening, if you don't ever deal with your problems, you'll stay the same. So if you really want to change, you have to start dealing with things. And you know what? I wasn't happy with the things I remembered about me. I wasn't happy with the things I found out about me. And I wasn't happy with a lot of the things I had done to my family especially. And you have to be prepared to face that. And you have to be prepared to some days not feel good about yourself. And I had to find ways to feel good about myself without having to feel a head change in doing it. So that's how I got into bodybuilding, and that's how I got into my tattoo removal. And January will be 15 years that I've been clean and sober. June was 15 years that I've been out. I just believe, and I elaborate a lot on this in my curriculum, because I developed a curriculum, and you can either do it in 10 groups or 15 groups, depending on how long you want to do your groups. And this is the curriculum that I use with my kids over where I work. And it's based on the diameter of your knowledge is the circumference of your activity. And too many times, if a kid's activity, their circle of friends and their environment is 2-3 blocks, then, you know, don't be surprised that the diameter of their knowledge is about this much. So I think what happened for me in its own way, I was able to expand that, to get out of Lindsay, this little town of 10,000. And even though I was going through the prison system and the youth authority, it was counselors and therapists saying, you need to read this book, you need to work on this. Do you know what self-esteem is, self-worth? Do you know what, you know, and I started understanding all these terms. In Lindsay, all I knew was cuss words. And I knew how to speak Spanish, and I'd interpret for my mom. And that was pretty much my circle. And as I got bigger and bigger, then the diameter of my knowledge kept growing, and then I realized I want more than this. And that's why I'm really happy when I hear about programs that are helping kids in these really desolate areas, in these rural areas. And they're going over there and telling them and taking them to colleges and read these books and look at these movies instead of just what they're used to. And then it's just like, whoa, you know, I want some of that. And that's what happens. And that's what we try to do with our boys. And that's what I try to do, is help people understand. I mean, there's so much. I could really get into it, Brian. I could get into it, man, about, you know, just in talking right now, I just, like, stuff came out, it's like, oh, yeah. But there's just so much.
Yeah. I think that's good.